Good morning, everybody. Feels like it's been forever since I did a live stream this early in the morning. Used to be the ideal time for me to do it because I like my mornings and I am a morning person, unlike a lot of other people, my wife included. Not quite a morning person, quite like I am. But, anyways, what a hell of a week. A lot to cover. I've been doing lots of foreign policy reporting within the last few live streams, last few shows. This is going to be a little bit more domestic policy in the future of the political and cultural right, I guess you would say, in the coming years. There's a big crack up over basically who is and isn't anti-Semitic. Um, and I'm being kind of tongue in cheek here, but the real divide seems to be um, over loyalty to Trump, which isn't quite the main focus of the argument that I see being talked about widely. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, Tucker Carlson, seemingly on one side of this debate, and you have Trump, JD Vance, Mark Levin, and a lot of the neoconservatives on the other side, which a lot of people don't seem to want to put Trump in either one of these camps. But I think we kind of have to, because this is kind of the focal point of the movement. When you have the leader, I don't think you can say that he's ambiguously not on either side. I think you kind of have to nail down what it is so that way we can kind of approach this and have a more serious conversation about this um, as it is right now. So I want to talk about that. We also have lots of foreign policy stuff. In the later half of the show, we're going to be talking about some of the stuff going on over in Israel, their proposed 20-year plan, and then, of course, about the sexual abuse, to put it PG-13, that's going on that caused the shutdown of the government. Of course, we're talking about Venezuela and some of the strikes going on there. And yeah, I think that's the plan for today's show. So, anyways, please make sure if you are watching live, you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Alex Patino, always good to see you, man. Yes, I've been offline for most of October, and now I'm back to kind of regrettably, begrudgingly posting and talking lots of shit on Twitter. But regardless, it's good to be back and it's good to see everybody. And of course, doing 5 till midnight at 8 p.m. Eastern time and posting on the Great Megalodon um, every Wednesday. Apologies. We're going to be trying to do the Chama album review from Soulfly on Wednesday, but I'll just see if I can get around to writing that. I started it, but then, of course, with a 3-month-old baby and a wife that needs help taking care of that baby, it makes me very, very busy, and we're always doing stuff. And I'm grateful for every second of it, but it does keep a man pretty busy. So, regardless, thankful to be back. And yes, so what other news going on? A Common Crown's going very, very well. Band practice will hopefully be on Tuesday. This past week had some unfortunate other stuff that just I couldn't get around to going to band practice, and some of it included moving my toolbox at work, which like you can't really see the cut that well. But man, I'll tell you what, be careful of caster locks on a toolbox because those things will fuck you up. So, yeah, I think that's all about for the first half or the first part of the show. That is the introduction. So make sure you go to tigerfitness.com through the link below. Use code Kyle M at checkout. Or just Kyle, not Kyle M. Tigerfitness.com/Kyle M to go to Tiger Fitness and let them know that the Matovcik family sent you and that you want to support me, everything I do, and taking care of the family here. Go to commoncrown.com for all Common Crown stuff. We're moving in the right direction. We're going to be going back at the studio next Sunday. So I don't know what time we'll be doing the show on Sunday, but we'll figure it out one way or another. What else do I got going on? Fox Sons Coffee. Use code Kyle at checkout to let Steven know that I sent you as well. Fantastic coffee. I have a bag underneath here and I completely forgot that I did. I always held it up when I would do the Sunday coffee podcast. But anyways, enough rambling on. Let's get into the rest of today's show. Where is it? There it is. All right, one more time. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is doing absolutely fantastic. Everybody had a great week. Life is good. Um, Life is good for me. Hopefully, life is good for you. But in the political sphere, man, there is a lot of shit going on. Uh, and I haven't seen anybody quite lay it out in a satisfactory way. So hopefully, I can kind of riff and ramble about in a satisfactory way for me. And hopefully, it's useful for you and kind of helps us navigate this conversation going forward. Um, it really seemed to blow up when Nick Fuentes started making the rounds, and, like, I'm not anti or pro Fuentes guy. I see some interviews that he does. I like some of the stuff that he says. I don't like everything, but he's entertaining, he's funny. He really has mastered the art of just, like, that online talking shit trolling, which I kinda like. Um I don't like it in regards to people saying things that they wouldn't say to somebody's face. Like when I see people on Twitter just dropping hard R's at black people or black people with families and saying, "Oh, you married that." I don't like that because I know a lot of these people would not go up to somebody and say that kind of stuff to their face, and I just don't think that's very becoming as a person to. I don't know, just say shit about people strictly because of their race. So, like, do I make racial jokes? Yeah, of course, everybody does. It's funny. The standing joke always is that everybody's a little bit racist, but I don't necessarily put myself in that camp. A friend of mine had once said that he's a macro racist, but like a micro individualist, and I think that's actually pretty accurate because I do see the net effect of groups, but I also treat each person I come across as an individual, and if their experience with me is bad, then I can kind of judge that person at least somewhat by my experience with them, but I don't let that code the entire group, right? But you can obviously see trends in the way that groups act and the way that groups behave and everything like that. So, but Nick Fuentes went on with Tucker Carlson, and it really wasn't like a hostile interview, but it also wasn't like two guys sitting down having a beer. There was kind of like a fleshing out of the issues. Now, I've made my feelings at least somewhat clear on where I stand with Tucker, and I definitely think over the last couple months, for sure, I've grown much more appreciative of who he is, his mission, and what he's doing. I still have criticisms about Tucker. I have criticisms about everybody, but definitely less for Tucker than I did, let's say, 6 months ago. I do have to question why someone like Tucker, who claims to be a truth teller, and I think he is to a large degree, would very publicly go out and lie about not knowing that his dad's in the CIA when he was saying stuff about Nick Fuentes because Nick was, saying his dad was in the CIA and talking about the obvious intelligence connections, which I've laid out in the show before. I think with Sean Russell. Him and I have talked about this a little bit, where Tucker was in Nicaragua fighting against the Contras way back in, I think it was like the 90s, the 80s. Um, he tried to get into the CIA. Supposedly, he was never allowed. Now, nobody knows if that's 100% true or not. But I'm sorry if I don't believe somebody who, when you do a quick Google search of Dick Carlson, the first thing that comes up was that he's the major news broadcaster and head of the CIA. I'm sorry if I don't necessarily believe a guy who has a show on the internet with millions of subscribers, rightfully, but he never did a simple Google search on his own dad to figure out he's in the CIA. And not only that, that's your dad. you you lived with this man at one point. You probably had a good relationship with him, or at least, I really hope he did. How would you not know what his job was? And I refuse to believe that he didn't know that, which I think it was on Sean Ryan's show that he said, "Oh, I never knew that my dad was in the CIA." Like, bro, come on. But regardless, so Tucker did this interview with Nick, and I really enjoyed it. Nick represents more of the younger generation who are really concerned about the soul of the country. And when I hear people talk about the Israel issue, you see a lot more people who aren't quite as focused on foreign policy, which is fine. They typically say, "Oh, I just don't care about Israel. We shouldn't fund any of it." And that is, from a basic standpoint, the right position, that we shouldn't be involved with any of this. I think where you get lost is that this does affect domestic policy. So it goes beyond just saying, "Oh, I just don't care about Israel." Once again, in a world we're not implicated in all their crimes and implicated in funding them, and then they're implicated on a domestic policy where you have 38 states that you can't criticize Israel, or else you'll get thrown in jail, you'll lose your job, you'll lose your pension, anything like that, because a lot of these 38 states with anti-BDS legislation are mainly for public sector employees. Um, I think this goes beyond just saying, "Oh, this, we should just treat them like any other country." Like, no, okay, so if we're giving the government the power to punish people strictly on the basis of criticizing a foreign government, then I don't think you can consider the US a sovereign entity as long as you have another government dictating their policy and dictating what that country can and cannot do. And if we're funding that country to the tune of, I think under Trump's administration right now, $41 billion, and we've given them, billions and billions of aid since the founding. I think the number is over $300 billion since Israel was founded in 1948. Now, obviously, we can sit here and talk about the founding of Israel. That's another topic for another time. We're just talking about as it is right now. Since Israel had became a country in 1948, we've sent them over $300 billion. So why do I bring this up? Because this whole 12-day war, in quotes, um, if we can't stop a country that we fund their military, probably a lot of their public sector employees and their welfare and all this other stuff, if we send them all this money, and when we tell them, stop, don't do this, don't break the ceasefire between you and the Palestinians, don't, or quit killing people in Lebanon or Hezbollah, and don't strike Iran, then what are we have a rogue nation that's operating in its own interest on our behalf that we fund. That's not really a sovereign country acting as a sovereign country. That means we have a rogue country acting as a rogue country that does not listen to the country that's funding it. Now, would Israel be able to fund and do all this stuff by itself? I don't think so. I think a lot of the reason that they do this, and I think everybody with a sane mind that's watching this realizes that they're only doing this because they know that the US is going to come to back them. And people said that plan truster people, which just are like the bane of my existence right now, that Trump stopped the 12-day war and he ended the war in Iran by striking the nuclear facilities. And there's no war because Trump struck Iran and the aircraft carriers had to turn around in the air. But then Trump just recently in an interview, and I don't have it pulled up, but had said that actually he knew that they were going to do that and he kind of let them go on with it anyways. Um, so I don't really believe that we weren't implicated in that, and like the US didn't know that, and the US isn't aware that they're breaking these ceasefire deals. Kind of like the whole deal in Ukraine, where Ukraine is operating and doing whatever they want to do. They're striking Russian infrastructure when Trump is trying to negotiate. And I don't know how serious we could take these negotiations. And this has kind of been a thing of the way that I've looked at the Trump's foreign policy um, negotiations ever since he got back into office, that it seems like oftentimes when they negotiate, that means they're coming in to stab you right in the back. Because every single time this happens, this is what happened. Or, they go in and do some military actions. So negotiations in Qatar, they got striked. Iran negotiates with Iran. They bombed Iran. When Russia comes over here, Putin says that he's baffled because guess what Trump does? He continues to arm and send intelligence to Ukraine. So it's tough to believe that they're negotiating in good faith when every single time the net result is that the other side gets attacked after Trump gets them in for negotiations. Now, you could say this is because these countries are doing this behind Trump's back, but if it's happened this many times, I just can't believe it's coincidence that they continually go behind his back. I have to believe that something else is going on, and I do believe that it's probably that Trump's just okay with it. Anyways, good morning, everybody. Please make sure you hit the like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I have to make sure I plug that as much as possible. It'd mean a lot to me and it helps the show keep getting boosted in the algorithm. So I think Tucker is looking at the foreign policy of the Trump administration, which I will criticize him for saying that Trump's foreign policy fascinated him. I wish I could remember the exact interview, but I try to watch Tucker's show pretty frequently. And he did praise his foreign policy, but then ever since he got in, you've been doing a lot of criticizing of the warfare machine. I've made this point before, but it just drives me absolutely nuts. The people who begged and pleaded and told you this is the most important election of our lifetimes and the US is over if you don't vote for Trump and it's your moral duty to vote for Trump. I don't care if people voted for Trump. That has never been my problem. My problem is the people who beg and plead and, morally condemn you if you don't do exactly as they say, and then now we're turning around surprised that he's doing all the things that he pretty much campaigned on. I mean, he said when it came to the Russia-Ukraine war that he would tell Russia that he would give Ukraine more than they've ever gotten. He bragged about sending them the Tomahawk or the Javelin anti-tank missiles, and that he would back Israel to help destroy Hamas. He campaigned on a lot of this stuff, and then he said throughout the last decade, really, that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Now, even his own director of national intelligence had said that Iran was not developing a nuclear weapon and that they had no intentions of developing a nuclear weapon. She had then turned around after Trump decided that he wanted to strike Iran and said otherwise. People said this is a loyalty test, but where does your loyalty lie, to a man or to the cause that actually betters this country? And this is the heart of the issue, is that people are deciding whether or not the people who are plan trusters, who are all on the Trump train, are demanding that you have loyalty to Trump and not to the cause, as in the cause of making America great again, restricting immigration, ending foreign wars, cutting back spending, conservative and libertarian principles that Trump had campaigned on. What are we doing here if if we're just strictly going by a man, not by the principles? Now, you could say your principles don't mean anything, but what does it matter if Trump is going against the things that he campaigned on and going against the things that he said would make America great on his campaign trail, which actually were largely true and that I agree with? The reason why I didn't support Trump is because I knew that he wouldn't live up to these promises, and I knew that he was going to go back on all of them. So, to me, this is bigger than Trump. This is bigger than one man, one person. This is about reclaiming the American right to reclaim America as a nation, not as an economic zone. This is to reclaim the America that the founders had envisioned. And if we're just, pledging allegiance to Trump, who's doing everything but what he campaigned on, what he promised, then I don't think we're living up to the cause. I think we're living up to a man and to loyalty. And this is kind of where I see the fault lines breaking. Marjorie Taylor Greene is now being ousted because she came out against H-1B visas and she came out against Israel. Now, if you followed me for long enough, you know that I've criticized Marjorie Taylor Greene for being a crazy whack job Zionist for the longest period of time. That had since changed since I wish I had the tweet pulled up, but it was a few months back when she was the first congressperson to say that what Israel was doing was committing a genocide. Out of all the people in Congress, she was the first one to say it. Now, Thomas Massey's been speaking out against it, and you don't have to go far on my timeline to find me singing Thomas Massey's praises. That being said, I'm now singing Marjorie Taylor Greene's praises because she's taking the right position on an H-1B visa. It's actually a better position than Thomas Massey, who I know has had a mixed record on immigration stuff, and I wish he'd be a little bit more of an immigration restrictionist. But I'm looking at him on net, and on net, he's the best congressperson that we have. Marjorie Taylor Greene is probably a close second, in my opinion, at least when you look at her on net and the long-term implications, and especially because she's a little bit more of a drug warrior, isn't she? Wants strict drug laws, and she wants to fight the drug war, and she is a China hawk, at least maybe not like to the degree that some other people are, but she still is a China hawk. Massey's the only one who's consistently good on all these issues. But you have Trump saying that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a traitor, even though she's been incredibly loyal to Trump. She was calling to impeach Joe Biden for a policy that Trump implemented. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but during 2020, there was a eviction moratorium where landlords could not evict people if they didn't make their rent because of the lockdowns and stuff. Now, my opinion is that I think that's an overstep from the government to tell property owners what they can and cannot do with their own property. Trump had initiated that through the CDC, and then Biden had continued it. Marjorie Taylor Greene at one point did call for the impeachment of Joe Biden over that specific policy. Okay, so then you should have agreed to impeach Trump, which I never agreed with any of the impeachment chants because a lot of them were just efforts to box Trump in so that way he couldn't run his own presidency for the most part, and so he couldn't negotiate with Russia because obviously the Democrats' pet project, because they're largely owned by, let's face it, Jewish billionaires. Their pet project is a ethnic blood feud between the Ukrainians and the Russians, which is largely a Jewish project. So that all being said, when you have somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey who are making a lot of noise in Congress and saying, "Hey, you promised this and you're not living up to it. We want this," then now they're persona non grata because they don't agree with the Trump train. They're not agreeing with everything that Trump does. In my opinion, they're on the right side of this issue. Now, the pushback that people give is always that, oh, they don't get anything done. They're just grandstanding. Okay, so you tell me which reality is preferable. You just have nobody telling the truth and nobody saying this is what we should strive for, what Donald Trump promised, or should we just let, all Congress be owned by a foreign country and just run along with the plan that's continuing to destroy the country? If you ask me, I'm with the people who say we're going to speak the truth and we're going to push for the best policy that's going to help America no matter what. And that's always been my perspective is that you need somebody to tell the truth. Would I ever run for political office? No, probably not, because I'd be persona non grata because some of the things I say, I'm a little too brash. Um, I'm a bald white dude who says bad things about a certain foreign government, and I don't want a war with China, with Russia, with Iran. So that makes me persona non grata, and I wouldn't get the big donor money. So whatever. But Tucker has kind of repeatedly sided with the people who are taking a stand against Trump. But it's kind of funny that he never goes out publicly against Trump. Now, I think the plausible deniability in all this is that Tucker wants to maintain a good relationship with Trump because he feels he can influence him into a better direction. I don't think that's possible. I think Trump is too lazy. He's a boomer. He doesn't want to put any effort forth to actually do anything that matters to the country. So he'll just, he'll say some good things. And then if he can get a win that's easy and not that hard to come by, he'll do it. But when push comes to shove, he'll taco, right? Trump always chickens out. So I think this divide largely is about loyalty to Trump or loyalty to what MAGA actually is. Um, and I think the younger generations are more loyal to what the cause is and loyal to making America a great country again. Uh, and I'm largely with them that, it's not about loyalty to a person. It should be loyalty to the cause, loyalty to the nation. JD Vance has made a little subtle stabs there. There was somebody I'm in a group chat with who said that he's subtly counter signaling Trump, but hopefully there's backroom conversations about like we need to do something or else it's all over for us. Um, I know Dave Smith has influence with Tucker and probably with some of those big wigs, but um, it does almost seem like libertarians are just not a serious part of the conversation, like at all. And maybe it's always been that way, but I feel like it's especially relevant now because it seems like the dissident right, if you can call that hodgepodge of people who believe in immigration restriction and a more Pat Buchananite perspective, they seem to be more influential than the libertarians ever were. And, maybe that's for the best because maybe that's a little bit more of a realistic vision. But I don't see the Libertarian Party being a serious thing. And if you go back 4 years ago when I first started this channel, you'll find me going to bat for the Libertarian Party all day, every day. I'm not doing it anymore. I mean, I'm kind of, I feel like it's a joke almost that I ever even did that. Like, I'm honestly kind of embarrassed that I really went to bat for the Libertarian Party so hard when really they haven't done anything. And it's controlled by largely just unimpressive people. I think Dave Smith and some of the other guys who were in the Mises Caucus and fronting the Mises Caucus, I think they felt the same way. So that's the same reason why they kind of backed out of the whole deal is because they just didn't see a path forward. The path forward seems to be, can libertarians influence the MAGA movement in some way? I don't know the answer to that. This is all just kind of ramblings and thoughts in my brain that come from witnessing everything that's going on now. And like I said, the major difference seems to be, are you with the Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey wing of the, maybe not even the Republican Party, but like the American right? Or are you going to side with the Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, Douglas Murray, the neocon and Zionist wing. I think Trump has chosen a side, and that is the neocon Zionist wing. The Lindsey Grahams, of course, like everybody, and Randy Fine. People were so surprised that Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene got like the cold shoulder from Trump, while Lindsey Graham had always got a warm welcome. Well, Trump campaigned with him. Like none of this stuff was completely unpredictable. Trump and Lindsey Graham have been really close for the better part of a decade now. Marjorie Taylor Greene only came into Congress back in 2020, and she's consistently supported Trump. But the two main issues are immigration and foreign policy, I think. And I think affordability is a big thing domestically, but I think this is kind of what colors the Trump coalition is the foreign policy issue. And Trump has chosen a side on the foreign policy issue, and that's being with neocons and Zionists. You look at the all the strikes of Venezuela, which we will cover here in a little bit, and I think it's signaling towards Marco Rubio's running the State Department, and Trump's okay with that. Pete Hegseth spending $2 billion in taxpayer money just to rebrand the Pentagon to the Department, or the Defense Department to the Department of War. Um, what happened to the peace president? They always like waffle with this messaging. Um, there was that interview where Laura Ingraham had pushed Trump on this whole 600,000 Chinese students. And like one thing that I get annoyed about is that when people say that there's all these Chinese spies, is there some? Sure. But I think this is largely like a relic of the ongoing Cold War with China to accuse every Chinese person of being a spy. Um, so and a lot of people don't realize that they're useful idiots for like the neoconservatives and like the war machine when they start saying this kind of stuff. I think it's just because they realize it's gonna go viral, it's popular, and to a degree they probably believe it. Um, but when Laura Ingraham in the one interview had pushed Trump on the 600,000 students, he showed a bunch of college universities would have to go out of business if they didn't take in all these, 600,000 Chinese. And I think most people, even, boomers would probably look at that and be like, okay, they should go out of business then. Let them fail. That's what, the libertarians, the Austrians have been saying forever. Without the cheap money, without the artificially low interest rates, without the government guarantees on all this stuff, these businesses would fail. And not only would they fail, they should fail, because the amount they're charging for tuition to charge for a product that's ultimately not profitable, what justifies that price? And what justifies that price is the government money going to it. Okay, so these universities have to shut down because we can't import enough people to fill these seats. Then they should shut down. If we cannot sustain a college university in this country because or without foreigners, then like I said, they should shut down. America should be for Americans. Some of the boys in the OGC are now pushing for Americans first, and I think that's a very, very good distinction. It's not far from America first to Americans first, because Americans are the heart and soul of the nation. The people like me who want to have families and want this country to prosper, who have roots here. I threw out a tweet and a bunch of people liked it because it was that stick figure sitting on a chair in a certain way, and it said, "How did you get in your career?" And I tweeted out, "My dad fixed cars. His dad fixed cars. His dad's dad fixed cars. So I fixed cars." So 4 generations, you've had 4 stocky Matovcik Polish motherfuckers here in Pennsylvania turning wrenches. There are millions of people just like me who did what their dad did, who did what their grandfather did, or who just trying to make an honest day's pay for an honest day's work in the country, who can't afford groceries, who can't afford healthcare, who can't afford to buy a house, who can't afford a prosperous future for their own, for their lineage. And if you're not willing to do anything for those people, then I think people have every right to criticize you and to vote you out or do what they see fit to make their country better. And I think that's what the Tucker Carlson wing is really kind of looking at. Um, Trump was saying in that interview, like, we're going to get $20 trillion from tariffs, which that's just on its face bullshit. There's no way they're raking in that much money, and if they are, then that means that you're getting some from foreigners, but most of it's probably being paid by taxpayers, because there have been countless papers from right-wing think tanks that said that, yeah, the tariffs fell 93% on American consumers, and then like 7% on the importers or the people pushing the products in, outsiders. Um, so like this whole tariff policy and the idea that Trump can just say that everything in the economy is going great. Dave Smith had a tweet where he said, It's like we're living through another 4 years of Biden just with better immigration, which is true. If you're just going to sit there and tell us that everything's great, don't believe your lying eyes. Grocery prices are going down, all this is getting better, but yet you still can't afford anything. Yeah, you have a right to be pissed off. Like, I don't think people want to be talked to like they're stupid. I don't like it when people talk to me like I'm dumb. I'm not the smartest person in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but I can read things. I know what my bills look like. I can tell that my energy bills are ridiculous right now. I can tell you that it used to be $30 to fill up my Cobalt. Now it's like 45. To go out and get groceries, I go to Giant Eagle and get like a handful of things, and it's $50. Um, I think a lot of people see that and they're rightfully pissed off. They got a right to be pissed off. Right. I'm gonna run an ad real quick and we'll continue on with the rant and raving about MAGA. Where is it? Here we go. All right, we're going to take a second today to chill and tell you about the show's sponsors, Tiger Fitness. Make sure you go to the link below to get all the supplements that I use day in, day out, and beyond. As I always say, you do not need supplements to become all jacked and tan or to progress in your health journey, but they could definitely be a useful tool in that respect. So, as you can see on tigerfitness.com, we got MTS Nutrition, Blackstone Labs, Ambrosia, HPN, Nutrix Research, America Labs, Alani New, Pump Chasers, there's Redcon One, Accent Sledge, plenty of different companies that pretty much have absolutely any supplement you could possibly think of: pre-workouts, fat burners, BCAAs, electrolyte mixes, you name it, it's on there. So go to Tiger Fitness through the link below. Use code Kyle at checkout to let them know that I sent you. Get your protein powder, you name it, anything that's going to help you stick to your diet and hopefully achieve your health goals. All right, thanks. Back to the show. All right, so I guess to wrap up this portion of the show about the whole civil war on the right, it's that the fight really is about what comes after Trump and if it should be just loyalty to Trump, who essentially is acting on behalf of Israel in a lot of respects, not 100%. I clarified that on a stream a few weeks ago. When I see people that say he's just completely controlled by Israel, that's not entirely accurate. It's accurate to a degree, but it's not entirely accurate because this goes both ways. Um, but it's deciding if we're just going to put all principles and ideas aside and just serve fealty to Trump, or if we're actually going to be true to the issues that got Trump elected. If you ask me, we should be more concerned with the issues that got Trump elected and fixing those issues than to just the person himself, because a movement does require a person, an elite, to kind of move things in a direction, but I think it requires an actual coherent strategy for how to fix those issues beyond just one person. So we're going to put a bow on that, and let's move into some of the foreign policy reporting that I wanted to talk about today. So where is it? So from USNI News, here, let me make the screen just a little bit bigger. US forces, this was published 2 days ago. So this is the most um, recent one I could find. I had one pulled up from Judge Knapp that a dear friend of the show, Kyle Anselin, had wrote up. But this is more recent. So US forces conduct 20th strike on suspected narco boat by Caitlin Burchett from the Pentagon image. You can see the boat there. U.S. forces struck a suspected narco boat in the Caribbean Sea earlier this week, killing 4 people, USN9 News had learned. The strike, which occurred on Monday. Oh, sorry. Had to sneeze. The strike, which occurred on Monday, killed all 4 people on board, leaving no survivors, a U.S. defense official confirmed Friday to USNI News. Unlike previous instances, Monday's fatal strike was not announced by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth or other members of the Trump administration on the social media platform X. It was the 20th such strike conducted by the U.S. since early September, when the Trump administration launched a campaign targeting suspected drug traffickers operating in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. The death toll has climbed to 80 killed, of which 79 were killed in the strikes, and 1 person was presumed dead after being lost at sea. 2 wounded survivors were repatriated to their home countries, which, to talk about this a little bit more, I don't understand why we can't seize the drugs off the boat. why you can't stop the boats in international waters, find out what's going on, and persecute those people if necessary and repatriate them. I have zero problem with them just being stopped in the waters and being sent back home if they actually are legitimately trafficking drugs. But no one seems to be making that argument. They're saying they're narco terrorists, but we have no proof. And they've admitted in other articles and other statements that they have no idea who they're killing. So if you don't know the names of the people you're killing, then how do you know they're narco traffickers? You need a coherent policy here. Um, Jordan, is that the boat that lit up like it was smuggling barrels of gasoline? All of them normally do. I probably saw this video at one point or another, but I don't know if that is that specific one that you're referring to. So basically, like, I wouldn't have a problem if they were stopping actual drug traffickers coming into the country. I don't think anybody would really have a problem with that. But I do have a problem with just extrajudicially killing people at sea when you have no proof that they're actually drug traffickers. And on top of that, if you don't know who you're killing, how do you know they're drug traffickers? It's unconstitutional, it's illegal, and it is a moral black stain on our country. Let me zoom in a little bit because I see that's a little bit tough for people to follow along with. As a part of the campaign, Hegseth on Thursday announced that a joint task force and U.S. Southern Command worked together to remove those suspected of trafficking narcotics from the Western Hemisphere. The operation, dubbed Operation Southern Spear, shares its namesake with a named exercise conducted earlier this year to further develop the use of unmanned air and surface vessels in counter narcotics missions in the U.S. Fourth Fleet Area of Responsibility. The following is the complete November 14th statement from a U.S. defense official. We're confirming that on the president's orders, there was a kinetic strike on November 10th in the Caribbean Sea, and 4 narco terrorists were killed with no survivors. As of today, there have been 20 total kinetic strikes, with 79 narco terrorists killed, 2 wounded and repatriated to their home, and 1 attempted rescue at sea by Mexican authorities. So yeah, this is the peace president here telling us that we're making the world safe again from alleged narco traffickers. And like, the other thing that just bugs the shit out of me is that supposedly, like, these boats aren't even big enough. Like, they don't have the actual capacity to make it to the US from wherever they're coming from. So we're literally just blowing boats out of the water for fuck's sake, pretty much. That's what's going on here. Um, it's ridiculous, and it's not good. And like I said, it's a moral black stain on our country to pretend that we're doing this some noble cause when really it's just because I think Venezuela has a relationship with China, and because this has been Marco Rubio's goal for regime change in Venezuela. Anyways, continuing on here. Another one, or well, one from the Libertarian Institute from our dear friend Kyle Anzalone. As I said, the USS or the U.S. aircraft carrier strike group now positioned near Venezuela. So the regime change operation still is moving forward. There's probably going to be regime change, or at least there's going to be military action performed on Venezuela sometime soon. Now, I hope not, but that's all signs kind of point towards that. The USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier and several other warships have arrived in the waters near Venezuela. The strike group was ordered to Southern Command's area of command as the White House is threatening Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group, led by the world's largest aircraft carrier, entered the U.S. Southern Command area of responsibility. A statement by the Fourth Fleet published Tuesday said, the Maritime Forces' arrival come after Secretary of War Pete Hegseth directed the carrier strike group to support the president's directive to dismantle the transnational criminal organizations and counter narco-terrorism in defense of the homeland. Which, as I said earlier, if they were legitimately actually after drug traffickers and people like that, I wouldn't be as concerned. But Venezuela is not one of the countries that traffics drugs. They are a hub for some cocaine moving, but they're not the main trafficker of it. The cocaine comes from Colombia, which, to their credit, they did go after Colombia to a degree, but they're not the main trafficker of it. Like I said, this is largely being driven by Marco Rubio because this has been his pet project since he came into Congress and Congress or the Senate, wherever, to basically go after Venezuela and to have this Monroe Doctrine foreign policy, which I do believe the US should have more influence on our own sphere, but it's not like China is like this ridiculous. They're not like the US and NATO. They have a trade partnership that does a lot of trade with Venezuela, probably get some oil from there. But when people talk about this, they also never bring up Russia. Russia and Iran have both sent weapons and people to Venezuela. I'm indifferent about that. I don't like the idea of them doing that because I know that if the US gets involved, now this is kind of like us poking back at them. It gets messy. My position has always been that the US should give Venezuela preferential treatment over just about any other country. Like you could probably start to maybe not cut ties, but start to back away from Saudi Arabia and just get Venezuela in because they have more oil than Saudi Arabia. So why don't we just start forging a little bit closer ties with Venezuela instead of Saudi Arabia? They're closer, so why not? Anyways, the Fourth Fleet touted massive destructive power that the Ford and its supporting warship are capable of. The statement did not disclose the location of the ships other than to say it was within Southcom's area of command. Since September, the U.S. has bombed at least 20 boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, killing over 70 people. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has asserted that the vessels were operated by cartels designated as terrorist organizations that were trafficking narcotics in the U.S. The Pentagon has not provided evidence to back up its claim. Additionally, Congress has not declared war or otherwise authorized President Donald Trump to use military force against drug smugglers. Senator Rand Paul slammed the strikes as extrajudicial killings, and Senator Rand Paul is correct. Washington previously deployed warplanes, destroyers, Marines, and attack submarine to the Caribbean. The aircraft carrier strike group is not necessary to destroy a few small boats each week. Multiple outlets have reported that the White House is considering expanding the strikes to inside Venezuela. The State Department has asserted that Maduro is the leader of a cartel designated as a terrorist group, which once again they have absolutely no evidence that Maduro is some leader of the cartel. And even Trump, funny enough, Trump has said himself that Maduro is willing to give him everything. If Maduro is willing to give you everything, then is it really about President Maduro? If he's cooperated with deportation flights, what's really going on here? I have to wonder. Let me finish up here and then we'll get on to the Israel stuff. Last month, Politico reported Trump administration decided to remove Maduro. The president is serious. No more mixed messages, no more excuses. A person familiar with the Trump administration's thinking told NatSec Daily, there is now a coherent whole of the government strategy to eliminate Cartel de las Solas and its leader, Maduro, which my understanding is that cartel is not active in the is not active in Venezuela. There are some pockets active in the United States, which if they are active in the United States, then they should absolutely be dealt with, removed, sent back to Venezuela to be dealt with by their government or kept by our own government. I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with sending the military into a city that has any kind of drug dealer, gone rampant situation. Back in my, more libertarian days, I probably would have said, they're just drug dealers. It's no big deal. But overall, when you have a society that has drug dealers and tolerates drug dealers and has them on every corner, and you have people dealing fentanyl and illegal drugs all over your neighborhood, I do think that kind of affects the soul and the actual coherency of the community. They should be dealt with. And I think people who think that's not a problem, I don't think they're living in reality. And listener, you can answer this question for me. Leave a comment, whatever. If you saw in your neighborhood, let's say you have a wife and 2 kids, and on your corner you saw somebody dealing drugs just open in the daylight on the corner with multiple people, and they look like drug users. Would you want that in your neighborhood? I don't think you would. I definitely wouldn't. I would be okay with the police at least, telling those people, hey, you need to leave. If you're going to do this, this has to be in the safety of your own home. But I don't favor drug laws or anything like that. I think the war on drugs has largely failed, but I also don't think you can just have unfettered access to drugs rampant on the street. Like, I don't think having junkies passing out on every corner is is indicative of a good society. No, I think the bigger picture question here is why are people turning to drugs? And it's because life isn't good for them. And could it be personal responsibility issues? Yes, absolutely. 100% it absolutely could be. But also, some of that is just the state of the economy. And when you have a fiat system that has inflated the currency so that, people can't afford a good life, then I think some of them do turn to drugs. I think there's many reasons for this, but yes, I think some of it is personal responsibility, but then also it's cost of living and overall quality of life that makes people turn to drugs. So, like I said, I don't think it's indicative of a healthy society if you have just rampant drug use everywhere. So I guess let's kind of move on to some of the Israel stuff. So Trump had issued a letter. Let me zoom in a little bit. Alex Patino, 100% that includes alcohol. If you want to get shit-faced drunk, do it inside your home. I don't see that or my kids be exposed to such behavior. Yeah, exactly. And I've never had a problem with that either. That like, yeah, if you want to get drunk, I'm perfectly okay with that. But I don't want drunk people roaming around my town, falling on their face. It's just drugs in general. And like, hey, I like the booze. Yesterday I had no, I actually didn't drink yesterday. Friday night, my wife and I went to the Cheesecake Factory. Pretty much like a celebration of our anniversary, and that our little girl is getting out of her. She was out of her Pavlik harness. She's into Rhino harness now. Um, I had 2 old fashions while we were there. Did I get shit faced? No. Have I gotten shit faced in public before and acted like an asshole? Yeah, absolutely. But that's no excuse. It's unacceptable. You don't want people running around like just drunk morons all over the place. It's not indicative of a healthy and good society. Like there's obviously places for that, for people to get rowdy and stupid. I'm okay with that, but like you don't want meth heads running around your streets. So, anyways, let's read this letter from Trump sends a letter to President Herzog formally asking him to pardon Netanyahu, saying the case against him is a political unjustified prosecution. So, His Excellency Isaac Herzog, President of the State of Israel, Jerusalem, dear Mr. President, it is my honor to write to you at this historic time. As we have together, just secured peace that has been sought for at least 3,000 years, which he really didn't. I hereby thank you and all Israelis for your gracious and warm hospitality, and I'm addressing the key topic of my speech at the Knesset. As the great state of Israel and the amazing Jewish people move past the terribly difficult times of the last 3 years, I hereby call on you to fully pardon Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been a formidable and decisive wartime prime minister and is now leading Israel into a time of peace, which includes my continued work with key Middle East leaders to add many additional countries to the world changing Abraham Accords, which, real quick, just, ugh. The Abraham Accords are not peace deals. None of those countries are really at war. Kazakhstan was just added, and I know everybody's making a big hubbub about that, but it's not really any kind of big deal because once again, none of these countries are at war. It's basically just trade agreements with all these countries, and they throw Palestinians under the bus. It's basically just bribing them to say, like, "Hey, I know you hate what we're doing or what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. We're going to bribe you to look the other way." Last night I had mesquite brown sugar whiskey. Oh, dude. I need I need some of that. That sounds good. I would love to have that. Get like an old fashioned, right? Big ol' ice cube, some of that, a little bit of sweet, a little bit of bitters, the orange peel. I like it, dude. That sounds really good. Very jealous. Very jealous. Prime Minister Netanyahu has stood tall for Israel in the face of strong adversaries and long odds, and his attention cannot be unnecessarily diverted. While I absolutely respect the independence of the Israeli justice system and its requirements, I believe that this case, quote unquote, against Bibi, who has fought alongside me for a long time, including against the very tough adversary of Israel, Iran, is a political unjustified prosecution. Isaac, we have established a great relationship, one that I'm very thankful and honored by. And we agreed as soon as I was inaugurated in January that the focus had to be centered on finally bringing the hostages home and getting the peace agreement done. Now that we have achieved these unprecedented successes, are keeping Hamas in check. It is time to let Bibi unite Israel by pardoning him and ending that lawfare once and for all. Thank you for your attention to this matter. For some reason, Trump loves saying thank you for your attention to this matter. I don't quite understand why he always says that now, but hey, whatever. Mm. Anyways, this is all about Benjamin Netanyahu's corruption cases, and part of the reason why he's facing these corruption cases is for probably bribes and different, internal politics of Israel, which I'm just altogether not that familiar with. But part of the reason why I think he's kept this war going is because if he had to face election, he'd probably lose because he is the longest serving prime minister in Israel's history. And October 7th happened, which is, the greatest attack on the Israeli state, um, on the Jewish people really since the Holocaust, from what they say. Now, once again, is that true? I'm sure there's disputes, but basically, um, you know, 1,200 people were killed on his watch. Now, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has explicitly said that the Hannibal Directive was used on October 7th. So some of those people were killed by the Israeli government. According to the former defense minister, this isn't like some Alex Jones conspiracy theory. You could find it on the Times of Israel, the Jerusalem Post, Haaretz. I'm pretty sure you could find it on all those websites where Yoav Gallant explicitly says that happened. But regardless, it um, happened on Netanyahu's watch. He deserves to be impeached and he deserves to be held accountable for that, for letting that happen. Now, they said there was also Charlie Kirk asked this and he went on Hasbara tour right after that. But was there a stand down order? Why did it take so long to respond? When they observed some of the drills that were going on right on the border, um, some of the guards had said, "Hey, there's something going on here. I think we should pay attention." Why were they not listened to? A lot of questions that need to be asked, and I don't see them being asked. So who knows what's going on, but it's definitely not good. So Trump is calling for the pardon of Bibi Netanyahu. I always see people trying to argue that, oh, Trump really hates Netanyahu. In fact, he's about to throw him under the bus and to throw some shade at Ian Carroll, who I like sometimes, other times I don't. He said when he was on Joe Rogan that they're organizing a coup against Netanyahu, him and Miriam Adelson. Based on what? There was no follow-up. That was back in like March. What the fuck happened to that? Nobody knows. Anyways, the next article I want to read from here, Israel is seeking 20-year quote unquote America First security agreement with the US. And this is like so on brand for like the alt Zog, as people call it, or the America First of today. That basically they're trying to rebrand Zionism as America First, and they're going to use, they're going to use the term America First in Israeli, or to basically secure more Israel aid. So Israel seeking, then this is from the Times of Israel, Israel seeking a 20-year America First security agreement with the U.S. report. With the current MOU set to lapse in 2028, Israel said trying to navigate GOP foreign aid skepticism by emphasizing U.S.-Israel cooperation. Netanyahu says Israel looking to be more independent. So Israel is angling for a 20-year security agreement with the U.S. With America First elements. The U.S. media reported on Thursday a deal, that would be broader in scope than past pacts and would last until the 100th anniversary of Israel's independence. The current 10-year memorandum of understanding between the two countries, third such agreement signed, expires in 2028. Signed under the Obama administration in 2016, it includes around $4 billion of aid to Israel annually. Now, the U.S. does send much more than $4 billion of aid annually because we also send them lots of weapons and also like just other aid. It's not just the $4 billion. Like there's a lot more to it. With growing skepticism around foreign aid, including to Israel and the Republican Party among those who subscribe to the U.S. President Donald Trump's largely isolationist America First policies, the next MOU faces challenges that the previous one did not. Discussions are on the next MOU began in recent weeks, according to the Axios report, which cited Israeli and U.S. officials after a long delay because of the war against Hamas in Gaza. Israel proposed a 20-year deal that would end on the country's centennial in 2048, and to appease those who opposed aid, it would allocate some of the funds for joint R&D rather than direct military aid, Axios reported. So basically, what I think they're trying to say is that the U.S. would see some kickbacks from the foreign aid to Israel, but I think people are largely uninterested in that at this point. I think people just want the money to stay here in America, which is a completely reasonable, ask and expectation. Zionism as America first. I'm Mexican. I'm furthest I can be from being a Semite. It would not benefit me at all. Yeah, and like it largely wouldn't benefit the American people either. I think a lot of people just they care about America. They want America to do well. As I said in the first part of the show, um, I think people just want America to be a prosperous country. People want to have families and afford their energy bills and drive a car that they like and not have to worry about paying an arm and a leg for healthcare. People don't care about foreign aid anymore. People are over it. Largely, you were able to kind of put this aside. But when the Ukraine war broke out, and all of a sudden we were able to find over $200 billion in money for Ukraine, and then the war in Gaza broke out, and then we were able to find billions and billions of dollars for them while people are struggling with inflation and groceries and gas and just everything else. The affordability of living in the United States has just completely left the building. I think people are right to be like, yeah, I'm sorry, fuck you. We don't want to pay for foreign countries anymore. And I think any sovereign country should say we don't want to pay for other countries' military expenses. It's a completely reasonable statement. Um, the project, sorry, the projects touted would be in defense tech, defense related AI, and Trump's Golden Dome missile defense project, among others. And an Israeli official told Axios, "This is out of the box thinking," Israeli official told Axios. "We want to change the way we handled past agreements and put more emphasis on U.S. Israel cooperation. The Americans like this idea." No, apparently they don't. However, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denied the report in an interview with Australian TV host Aaron Milan. "I don't know what they're talking about. My direction is the exact opposite. I think it's time to ensure that Israel is independent." Yes, I agree with Netanyahu here. He continued, understand that our military aid is like a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what the US spent in Afghanistan or spent in the Middle East. It's tiny, but I think that we have a very strong economy. We have a very strong arms industry. It's true that even though we get what we get, which we appreciate, 80% of that is spent in the United States. It produces jobs in the United States. But nevertheless, I'd like to see a much more independent Israeli, even a more independent Israeli defense industry. The White House declined to comment on the Axios report. So you can see here Trump, Netanyahu, and Isaac Herzog. Trump has referred publicly to the billions in aid given to Israel during both his terms. In 2018, he dismissed concerns that pulling U.S. troops out of Syria could endanger Israel. We give Israel $4.5 billion a year. They're doing very well defending themselves if you take a look, he said. During a rocky White House visit in April, Trump brought it up again as Netanyahu listed beside him. Don't forget, we help Israel a lot. We give Israel $4 billion a year. That's a lot. U.S. aid agreements are seen in Israel as key to helping it maintain its qualitative military edge over potential threats. The U.S. has either jointly developed or financed all three tiers in Israel's missile defense program, made up of the Iron Dome short range missile interceptors, David Sling medium range, and Arrow long range systems. So I think what I forgot to mention here was that I think some of this money would come back to the United States in reference to defense spending, as in like Americans building some of the weapons, but this isn't like stuff that we should want to build. We should want to build stuff that makes everybody's lives better. We don't need these giant missile defense systems. And basically, it is just like a kickback to arms manufacturers and to politicians who have special interests that are getting paid off by Boeing, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, all those companies. Unfortunately, the juice type people nice decided that a white Christian nation cannot be trusted and after World War II have been throttling every European nation either through buying politicians or articles, and the USA has been used to further these acts of destruction to keep the world in check. Nailed it, dude. Nailed it. Exactly. You can't have a sovereign country when you have these types that like to liberalize society. Missile defense technologies have been developed in Israel using U.S. funds and are available to U.S. defense contractors involved in the development. The U.S. committed to providing billions in the military assistance to Israel and Egypt each year when they signed their 1979 U.S. brokered peace treaty. While the U.S. aid once made up a significant chunk of Israel's military spending, has significantly declined as a percentage in recent years as Israel's economy has flourished. Under the 2025 budget, the Defense Ministry's budget alone swelled to a record NIS 110 billion, 29 billion dollars out of total defense budget of NIS 136 billion, 36.9 billion. Jeez, that is a lot of money. So, um, yeah, man, they spent a lot of money on military stuff, man. I'll tell you what. So, for the very last part of the show, we have some pretty bleak stuff to talk about. Um, the Knesset had been arguing about whether or not it's right to, we're an hour in now, so I'll just say it, to rape a man, to rape Palestinian prisoners. We're going to cover this in these next two articles. I got one. Let me make sure I got the date right. July 30th, 2024. So a little over a year ago. And then I have one from about a week ago. And this is all about what happened to a Palestinian prisoner that was essentially raped and sodomized by a group of IDF soldiers. So before we do that, I'm just going to run this Fox and Sons ad real quick, and I'll be right back. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break from the show to tell you about the show's sponsor. We are now brought to you by Fox and Sons coffees. You can see right here, I got the Den Blend Dark. Really enjoy that. I've been drinking a lot of their Brazil honey prep. Right here, as you can hear, there's not a lot of beans left in it because I've been drinking it quite a bit. Just tell you a little bit about Fox and Sons, why I support them and why you should too, is that Stephen had started the company up in Michigan to help teach his son about entrepreneurship. I'm all about that, and I do firmly believe that in order to spread liberty in our lifetimes, we have to support those who support similar values as us. And Stephen does support all the same libertarian values that I bring and talk about on the show a lot. So go to foxandsons.com, use code Kyle at checkout to get 15% off of orders $25 or more, and there's always free shipping whenever you place an order that is more than $37.99. Find their coffee absolutely fantastic. All right, that's enough. So let's talk about the prison rape that is going on in Israel and our greatest ally doing the most moral army in the world stuff that everybody says they always do. So this is pretty rough. So for sensitive ears, you might want to cover them because this is going to get ugly. Israeli lawmaker defends alleged rape of Hamas prisoner as far-right protesters rage over IDF troops detention. Ultra-right-wing Israeli nationalists stormed two military facilities late Monday protesting the detention and questioning of 9 Israeli Defense Forces reservists suspected of raping and abusing a Palestinian prisoner whose injuries were so bad he had to be hospitalized. Social media videos show guards at the Sid Taiman military base and prison near Beersheba in southern Israel shouting at and pushing military police who had arrived to question the reservists, seemingly in defense of the suspects. So once again, this is dated July 30th, 2024. The reason why I'm reading this is because it's going to bring us to current day here in a minute. At the Sid Taiman facility is known to hold Palestinians arrested in Gaza since Israel launched its war on the territory Hamas rulers in response to the group's gruesome October 7th attack. The soldiers suspected of the abuse have been held for questioning, which is rare in Israel during an ongoing conflict and has drawn a furious reaction from far-right Israelis, including some senior government officials. On Monday evening, a group of Israelis attempted to storm another military facility with one protester threatening an uprising against the government if the suspects remain in custody. So as you can see, for those listening, there's just a picture of a bunch of Israelis fighting, a bunch of IDF soldiers. The 9 Israeli soldiers suspected of the abuse were to appear before a military court Tuesday. Israelis have been rattled by the events, which have highlighted the deep political divisions in the country. A member of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, speaking Monday at a meeting of lawmakers, justified the rape and abuse of Palestinian prisoners, shouting angrily at colleagues questioning the alleged behavior that anything was legitimate to do with terrorists in custody. Lawmaker Hanach Milwidsky, sorry, was asked as he defended the alleged abuse whether it was legitimate or not to insert a stick into a person's rectum, which his video was circulating all over Twitter. Yes, he shouted in reply to his fellow parliamentarian. If he is Nukba, a Hamas militant, everything is legitimate to do. Everything. Israel's far-right national security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's drawn U.S. reprimands with his provocative actions since the war started, wrote in a post on social media, "Take your hands off the reservists." Here's a picture of Israelis protesting. Right-wing protesters wave Israeli flags outside the Seed Timon military detention facility after Israeli military police arrived as a part of an investigation into suspected abuse of a Palestinian detainee near Beersheba, southern Israel, July 29th, 2024. Other Israeli officials, however, including Netanyahu and Army Commander Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, condemned the attack on the army base by far-right protesters. Breaking into a military base and disturbing the order there is severe behavior that is not acceptable in any way, Halevi said in a statement, adding, "We are in the midst of a war and actions of this type endanger the security of the state." Netanyahu called for calm, adding his own strong condemnation of the protesters for attempting to break into an IDF base, while Defense Minister Yoav Gallant warned that even in difficult times, the law applies to anyone. Nobody may trespass into an IDF bases or violate the laws of the state of Israel. United Nations agencies and human rights organizations, along with officials in Hamas-run Gaza and former prisoners interviewed by international news agencies, have alleged abuse of Palestinians in Israeli defense detention facilities. Israel's military insists that its detention centers are run in accordance with international law, which there's video proof, dude. You can't lie about this stuff. There's video proof of them sodomizing a man so bad to the point that he had to go to the hospital to seek treatment. You can't lie about that. So, and I like how the big deal was the trespassing. It wasn't raping a prisoner and shoving sticks in his ass that was the big deal. It was the trespassing. You think we would make a bigger deal about this because this is, we're told that Hamas are animals and they did such gruesome things to women, the 40 beheaded babies, which was a lie, and mass rapes, which was a lie. But apparently, when they're literally shutting down the government over a debate about whether or not they can sodomize a Palestinian prisoner, come on, man. Come on. So let's finish up. This could be the last story of the day. Feel free to send in any super chats. I'll answer any and all questions to the best of my ability. The Palestinian Center for Human Rights document testimonies of systemic rape and sexual torture in Israeli detention against released Palestinian detainees. So this is from the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. So you could say there's a biased sample, sure, but we're going to read it anyways, and you guys can decide what's true. I'm just here to kind of read the news that I find relevant. The Palestinian Center for Human Rights documents one of the most heinous crimes that can be committed against human beings and their dignity in the modern era. In recent weeks, and once again, this was aired on November 10th, 2025. In recent weeks, the PCHR staff collected new testimonies from a number of Palestinian detainees from the Gaza Strip who were recently released from Israeli prisons and detention camps. These accounts reveal an organized and systemic practice of sexual torture, including rape, forced stripping, forced filming, and sexual assault using objects and dogs, in addition to deliberate psychological humiliation aimed at crushing human dignity and erasing individual identity entirely. PCHR affirms that the testimonies do not reflect isolated incidents, but constitute a systemic policy practice in the context of the ongoing crime of genocide against more than 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, including thousands of detainees held in prisons and military camps closed to international monitoring bodies, including the International Committee of the Red Cross. Testimonies by PCHRs, lawyers, and field researchers contain harrowing testimonies relating to the cases of rape perpetrated by IOF, Israeli occupation forces, against Palestinian civilians, including women who were arrested for different areas across the Gaza Strip over the past 2 years. The testimonies indicate that arrests were carried out without any legal justification other than the victims being residents of the Gaza Strip, as part of the policy of collective punishment designed to humiliate the Palestinians and inflict maximum psychological and physical harm on them. These practices are part and parcel of the ongoing crime of genocide against the Palestinian people in the Strip. Among these cases is NA, a 42-year-old Palestinian woman and mother who was arrested while passing through an Israeli checkpoint set up in northern Gaza in November 2024. In her statement to the PCHR staff, NA recounted multiple forms of torture and sexual violence, including being raped 4 times by Israeli soldiers, repeatedly subjected to obscene insults, stripped and filmed naked, electrocuted, and beaten across her body. She told the lawyers, "At dawn, I heard the soldiers shouting, saying that morning prayers were forbidden, and I think it is the 4th day after my arrest from Gaza. The soldiers moved me to a place I didn't know because my eyes were blindfolded, and they ordered me to take off my clothes. I did so. They put me on a metal table, pressed my chest and head against it, cuffed my hands to the end of the bed, and pulled my legs apart forcefully." I don't know how much I want to read this, but this is just reading from the article. "I felt a penis penetrating my anus and a man raping me. I started screaming, and they beat me on my back and head while I was blindfolded. I felt the man who was raping me ejaculate inside my anus. I kept screaming and being beaten. I could hear a camera, so I believed they were filming me. The rape lasted about 10 minutes. After that, they left me for an hour in the same position with my hands cuffed to the bed, with metal handcuffs, my face on the bed, my feet on the floor, and I was completely naked. Again, after an hour, I was raped fully in the same position with penetration into my vagina, and I was beaten while I screamed. There were several soldiers. I heard them laughing and the camera clicking as it took pictures. This rape was very quick and there was no ejaculation. During the rape, they beat me with their hands on my head and back. I cannot describe what I felt. I wished for death at every moment. After they raped me, I was left alone in the room, hands still cuffed to the bed without clothes for many hours. I could hear the soldiers outside speaking Hebrew and laughing. Later, I was raped again vaginally. I screamed as they beat me. I tried to resist. After more than an hour, I'm not sure about the time, a masked soldier entered, removed my blindfold, lifted his face covering. He had white skin and was tall. He asked if I spoke English. I said no. He said he was Russian and ordered me to masturbate his penis. I refused, and he hit me in the face after raping me." Jesus. "That day I was raped twice. I was left naked the whole day in the room where I spent 3 days. On the first day, I was raped twice. On the second day, I was raped twice. On the third day, I remained without clothes while they looked at me through the door, slit and filmed me. One soldier said they would post my photos on social media. While I was in the room, my period started. They told me to put on clothes and transfer me to another room." Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Another incident, a 35-year-old Palestinian man, a father, was arrested at the Al Shifa hospital in Gaza in March 2024. He told PCHR's field researcher about the brutal torture he endured during 19 months of detention, including forced stripping, obscene insults, threats of rape against him and his family, culminating in his rape by a trained dog inside the C. Timon military. He stated, "I was moved to a section I didn't know inside the side Timon during the first weeks there amid repeated suppression operations. I was there taken I was taken with a group of detainees in a degrading manner to a place far from the cameras, a passage between sections. We were stripped completely. Soldiers brought dogs that climbed on us and urinated on me. Then one of the dogs raped me. The dog did deliberately, knowing what it was doing, and inserted its penis into my anus." Jesus. "Well, the soldiers kept beating and torturing us and spraying pepper spray in our faces. The dog's assault lasted about 3 minutes, and the overall suppression lasted about 3 hours. Because of the severe beating, all of us sustained injuries across our bodies. I suffered a severe psychological breakdown, deep humiliation. I lost control because I could never have imagined experiencing such a thing. Afterward, a doctor stitched a wound in my head by torture, 7 stitches without anesthesia. I also suffered bruises, fractured my limbs, and a rib fracture." So just lots and lots of stories about this. Just absolutely awful stuff. So I won't read any more from that because just awful, awful. So our greatest ally doing what they describe as the most moral army, doing the most moral things, as we're always told. It's unbelievable, it's unacceptable, and we should absolutely cut off all aid, all ties from Israel, get rid of all anti-BDS legislation, completely cut off all foreign aid, and have absolutely zero partnership with a country that does these kind of things. Um, it's disgusting, it's sad, um, just absolutely horrible. So I think that's about all I wanted to read today. I know there was some Epstein stuff going on. I have not been able to parse through any of it. I haven't really paid much attention to that. Um, no new China news that I felt was relevant right now. There was some positive news, but I just didn't feel like today's show really would have fitted in. So I think that's about all I got for everybody today. The soul of the right is in a war, and I'm on the side of Tucker Carlson, Thomas Massey, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. That puts me against Trump, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I've been against Trump for a long time now because I know who he is and how he operates, and just that's that. So, if you guys don't got anything else, please make sure you go to the Great Megalodon and subscribe if you're into heavy metal and just want to hear stuff that's not political, not foreign policy related. None of that stuff. It's just all about music. Of course, go check out A Common Crown. And of course, tomorrow night is 5 till midnight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be on there. And feel free to become a channel member for the lowly price of $2.99 a month. I'd greatly appreciate it. And it goes a far way in supporting me and everything that I'm doing here. I have a couple of interviews that I'm starting to line up. So we're going to start seeing guests on the show again. But don't expect it every single week. I kind of enjoy doing these things solo because I don't really it's just a pain in the ass to try and schedule people. So I'm just going to do my own thing, and if people can come, cool. If not, that's cool too. Yeah, Kyle kicking off our Sunday morning with some light reading about gang rape with dogs. Yeah, unfortunately, most moral army though. That's what we're always told. So thank you everybody so much for hanging out here with me on your Sunday morning. If you like this time, I'll continue to try to make this a reality, but I just do these whenever I feel like doing them on Sundays, and that's that. So I do have, like I said, a couple of interviews scheduled. I'm waiting to hear back from somebody who I think everybody's really going to like this show. It will be next Sunday if everything goes all right. It's also going to depend on when A Common Crown's done recording next Sunday. So looking forward to sharing that with everybody. So yeah, I think that's about all I got for everybody. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care.